All right. Call this meeting back to order. We have returned from lunch. Thanks for lunch, Commissioner Toman. And where we left off on the agenda under the action and presentation items was item number 11. Excuse me, item number 13, the CDC Memorandum of Understanding. With us this afternoon is Sweetwater County Treasurer Mark Cowan. Thanks for rejoining us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are reviewing the MOU with the CDC. This goes back several years with the Child Development Center, where they actually took a specific purpose to help build a couple of buildings, one in Rock Springs, one in Green River. There were overruns on the funding for the CDC. That funding has been held in kind of an escrow account, basically, for the county building that is in Rock Springs, and then Green River has done the same thing. This MOU has been amended several times. The MOU for the city of Green River was written once, and so they have in their MOU the ability to fund any kind of maintenance expenses and operations expenses out of that MOU. Our MOU has always been kind of a fixed amount, and so we've had to modify that MOU several times. What we're trying to do today, after a meeting with the CDC, is to amend the MOU to match what the city of Green River has done with theirs, where they can turn in reports and expenses for operations and maintenance, and we can just fund those out of that basic escrow account. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Mark. I can't remember. Maybe it was in the packet and I missed it, but how much was that excess? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't know what it was total, but we have about $1.5 million, and the city of Green River has about $1.5 million too that they
The original overage was about $5.5 million.
There you go.
Wowzers. Nice way to supplement your maintenance fund. Questions on the MOU, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I brought this up with Mark in an earlier discussion. But I think it's something we all should be considering on how we would enact this going forward. If we allow them to just pull whatever out of it as a maintenance item, how would we approve those vouchers? Would we do it like we do the hospital's maintenance fund and have them submit that on a monthly, quarterly, however basis, and then we review them and resubmit them? Or is it just something that would be submitted directly to the clerk's office for payment? I'm not sure what that would look like going forward. When it's just a simple line item and a disbursement, that's one thing. But if we're going to allow an open-ended transaction, what's our oversight?
So I'll give you a couple things on that. You're right. We did have a good conversation about that. Currently, what happens is the treasurer's office just pays. So they have a $50,000 agreement in the MOU. We write them the check for the $50,000. It's been amended a couple times. We gave them an extra $60,000. So basically what would happen here is it would just go to the treasurer's office. The treasurer would approve the expense as a maintenance or operations expense, and the treasurer would pay it. It wouldn't come out of the county funds because it's not in the county funds. It's actually their funds. And so we're actually kind of escrowing their funds for them.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, just a question on the MOU and the language. In section 8, Mark, the last sentence to me is very confusing. It basically says that the CDC's request for reimbursement shall be fully documented, showing compliance with these restrictions, and shall be submitted to the treasurer no less frequently than every 2 months. So that would tell me that they would have to do it at least every 2 months. Is that what the intent is? Do you want them doing that every 2 months, or would you want them to do it not any more than every 2 months?
So we took the language from the city of Green River, obviously. And I think that we could amend that,
Got to be
whatever.
an easier way.
Probably is an easier way. So yeah, I think if we wanted to change some language there, we could do that. But this was the exact language that came out of the city of Green River's MOU.
Yeah, I just don't like that language with it, but I could come up with something a lot better, I think, real quick. But I would like to see that changed. Other than I don't have any issue with it, but I just think that that's very confusing.
Any other feedback, commissioners? What do they submit in Mark? Is it just a I mean, obviously it's not a voucher through like the county clerk's office, so is it just a invoice or a description of what they use the funds for in regards to maintenance and janitorial and what have you, or?
Yeah, so for the city of Green River, that's what they've done. You know, they'll say, hey, we've got a hole in the parking lot that we need to fix, or we've got an air conditioning units that's failed. And so that's what they've submitted. With these MOUs, what they've always done is they've come in and they've said, well, we've got to repatch the parking lot. That's going to cost us another $120,000. So we're going to add $120,000 to the MOU. And then the MOU is amended, and then we fund them $120,000 out of their account. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any other feedback or amendments?
Mr. Chairman, would it make sense just to eliminate the timeline on the last sentence of the first paragraph of 8? And just say that they have to submit the documentation to the treasurer, because I'm assuming your office is looking at them and saying, this is a maintenance. So as long as they're submitting it with the request, I don't think a timeline's even necessary.
I agree completely. So I think we could just take that and end it with treasurer and leave the no less frequently than every 2 months out of this. So.
And then, and Mr. Chairman, I think this is prime example of why the county commission needs to be selective about projects that end up on the 6-cent ballot. I think that a disservice to the people of Sweetwater County was done when a project that provided capital funding to a non-government entity was put on a ballot without the forethought of what overages would be used for. And fact is, if those overages didn't exist, looking at the expenditures over the last 14 years, neither would the CDC. They are the benefits of an oversight that provided millions and millions of extra dollars to a nonprofit organization that clearly did not have a long-term plan to provide services and fund those services. I commit to not allowing that to happen on a 6-cent project while I am a commissioner. It's necessary that we keep some oversight here, because we have to protect the fact that this is tax dollars that were committed with specific language on a ballot initiative. We need to make sure that this is only ever used for the things that ballot language says it can be used for. Otherwise, I would say, let's just sign it over to them and divest ourselves of it, because it's an ongoing pain for county government to have to oversee this. But it is a problem we inherited. So I'm going to move that we adopt this resolution with the amendment to remove the last part of the last sentence of the first paragraph of section 8. So that sentence will stop at the word treasurer, period, and strike no less frequently than every 2 months.
Thanks, Commissioner. We do have a motion to approve the 4th addendum to the memorandum of understanding between the Sweetwater County Child Development Center and Sweetwater County by and through its Board of Commissioners and the Sweetwater County Treasurer, Mark Cowan, with the amendment of removing no less frequently than every 2 months at the end of paragraph 8 by Commissioner Richards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. Any further discussion on the MOU?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Slaughter.
and I think this is just informational and something that concerns me a little bit with respect to this. At the time this was originally set up, after the overage had been determined. The real intent was to try and provide roughly the same amount of money to the CDC as what the county had been providing for them in each annual appropriation. And the only concern that I've got with respect to this, and I realize this is what the city is doing, and it's probably a good way to handle this, but I'm afraid that this money will be expended much faster than what that intent was. And I think if that is the case, at the point in time where this money has been fully expended, we need to look very seriously at how we would continue to help fund the CDC at that point in time. I don't think just because they spent the money a lot faster than what it was intended to be spent here, that it should encumber us in the future or tie us to something that we would have to do at that point. And I just see this where we could have potentially basically a perpetual fund for this if it were set up right. I can see it being spent very quickly under this manner. And not to say that it's bad, once again, just from my perspective, that's just how I see it.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's unanimous. Moving right along on to item number 14. We've got the Sweetwater County Investment Policy and Property Tax Refund Program update, and we'll turn it back to Treasurer Cowan.
Okay, Mr. Chair, this is just going back over the investment policy that we approved last year. There is a new addition to the investment policy as approved by the legislature. There is going to be, and it is not created yet, a new fund called YL 3, which would allow for investment into equities. That particular fund, as discussed during the legislative session, was to be kind of an S&P 500 fund where we would be able to invest a small portion of the county funds into equity. So I've included that in the investment policy. I will tell you at this time, I don't have any intent of putting money in that fund, but I do want to have the tool in the toolbox if the opportunity arises and the need arises. So other than that, the policy remains the same as last year.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions on Sweetwater County investment policy? Commissioner Slaughter?
Mr. Chairman, just raising the same concerns that I did during our discussion of the investment policy last year under subsection 14. Basically, what that section is allowing us to do is to invest in corporate bonds and also in mutual funds or exchange traded funds. As our treasurer would allude to these, he sees this as being a tool in the toolbox. I agree with that. I'm just not sure that this is a tool that I am comfortable in using. There are some tools out there that I'm better off not using when we talk about physical tools. This is one that I think could potentially be an issue for us. I mean, if we allow this, there's nothing to stop the treasurer's office from potentially investing in exchange traded funds on Bitcoin or something of that nature, which I'm not familiar with and I don't really fully understand. I believe it's getting into an area of risk that we may not want to be involved in. But once again, this is just something that I had brought forth last year when we talked about this. And I just see it as something that is beyond what I would like to see the risk of our portfolio taking on.
So I appreciate that, Commissioner Slaughter. You're right. We did address this last year as well. We don't have any funds currently in any of those accounts. And when we do, if we do decide to do that, we actually have to work through a fiduciary to help us do that. It's not something that I could go buy Bitcoin with or any other ETF. We actually have to work through a fiduciary to do that. And it's not something that I felt like was valid at the time, but I do think that we need to have that option should the need arise. As we watch these interest rates, this is a strange market. We haven't seen things like this in decades. And so we're watching the Fed very closely. And I think that this is just another one of those things that we have to have an option to use should we need to. But I can tell you don't have any intent of doing anything with that right now.
Any other comments or questions, commissioners? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the Sweetwater County investment policy for fiscal year 24-25 as presented.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Richards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Let the record show, motion does pass 4-0 with one nay.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll give you an
Hold on,
update
next.
really quickly. There you go.
And,
I'll give you an update really quickly on the property tax rebate program. It's running very successfully. The treasurer and the assessor's office have been both working very diligently to take in applications. We've received over 100 applications in our office, and that program is working very well. The county option to offer a rebate program is there. I think we've looked at it in the past, and I think it's one of those things that as commissioners, you have to make that decision. But I think the program that the state has offered by adding a couple of tiers has opened the door to more recipients of that program. And I think it will be run very successfully this year. So I just wanted to give you that update and to have citizens, if they have any interest, make sure that they stop by the assessor or the treasurer's office. We'd be happy to help them with their application for the property tax rebate program.
thanks, Mark. Yeah, we appreciate that. And heard from Assessor Davis this morning too, clarified, I thought I had it all figured out and I was way off. So there's a lot of moving parts with different legislation and, tax exemptions and rebates that took place at the legislature. I think if you were down there, it was hard to follow too. So bringing it back home is even more difficult, but nonetheless, there is some relief there. So it's always
Yes.
good to have some options.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's been a little confusing for all of us because we thought we had programs in place, then the governor vetoed a couple programs. And so we all had to scramble to figure it out. But I think that the state program is fantastic, and we'd love to help as many people as we can with that.
Very good. Any further comments, commissioners? Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you coming and giving us these updates, and those are a little bit easier to work with than some of the other load today. So thanks for that.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Moving right along. Well, I guess you're still up, aren't you?
Still kind of,
Sorry about that. I was trying to dismiss you.
you're fine.
Item number 15 is
We're always trying to dismiss Treasurer Cowan.
request to restaff a vacant position in the county treasurer's office. With us is obviously Treasurer Cowan as well as HR Director Gary McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. I think that this has been a position, as you know, there was some kind of reorganization, some individuals that had resigned within the treasurer's office. And this is a position that had been left vacant for a while some of those other positions were being trained and filled. It's been about 4 months roughly. And I think so I said put that on the regular agenda, maybe rather than the consent agenda. But basically, this is just replacing a budgeted position within a licensed clerk position within the treasurer's office. This is a budgeted position. The expectation is to start this at an entry level auto licensed clerk, with the expectation at some point they'll move to an auto licensed clerk too. And the cost differences is indicated on the form, really due to the potential insurance of the program, not knowing who would be hired. And I think it turned out to be a good decision in terms of not replacing those immediately, allow the people to get trained and up to speed before trying to fill another vacancy. I think that's where you're at now. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Gary. Any questions on the vacant position, commissioners? If not, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to fill a position.
Do you have a motion to restaff the vacant position in the county treasurer's office by Commissioner Toman? Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Richards. Any discussion? Hearing none, all's in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Now I'll tell you bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Moving right along to item number 16, we've got a request to hire seasonal employees in the election department. Not really sure why, but with us is HR Director McLean as well as Clerk Lane from the County Clerk's Office. Trying to get the humor going. Everyone's
Thank you.
kind of down from lunch, so.
Well, the reason is really just to keep a monitor on the five of you, I think, we
Thanks to
need a
all of
little
that.
reinforcement, so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. It's, that time of year again. Election season will be heating up and, need to bring, some folks on board, to, assist with the elections. Typically, they'll start in May sometime and continue on through, November. And, before you is just kind of a cost summary, of what those are. Those were positions that are addressed both in the budget and have been part of the election process. So they'll just be seasonal positions. There's no health insurance or benefits associated with those. So just a hourly rate for the time that they're there. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to address those with the board at this time.
Thanks, Carrie. Any questions, commissioners, on the seasonal employees? If not, I'd entertain a motion to hire the seasonal employees in the election department as presented. Motion by Commissioner Richards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Gary,
Gary.
while you're here, Gary, will you stick around and talk to me at the next break?
I would absolutely.
A new issue came up.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is item number 17. We've got resolution 2405 CC01, adopting Enrolled Act number 45 and establishing a location for absentee voting and counting centers. And we'll hand it over to Clerk Lane.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. As Chairman West stated, I do have a resolution before you to adopt the Enrolled Act number 45, which is housing the absentee count center here in the courthouse. Instead of sending all the absentee ballots out to each polling location, we established this as a count center, and the counting board comes here to count those with our bigger machine we have locked in the back. And then also as an early absentee vote center, so we can open it up for early voting.
Very good. Thanks, Cindy. Any questions?
Actually, let me, before I do that, I forgot. And then attached to that is our 2024 polling locations. We haven't changed any of those, so I didn't do that separately. I've attached it to this to show you where our precincts and districts are. We did have to change 2 polling locations, but we found buildings within the precincts to hold those, to hold the election on election day. We had to move the Green River Library, which will be under construction for their grant, the changes to their community rooms. And we moved that here to the courthouse. It will be downstairs in the community room. And then the White Mountain Library in Rock Springs has moved to Hilltop Baptist Church. But because it remained in the same area, we don't have to do any approvals for that. But I just wanted to give you that information and let you know in case you hear that I moved polling locations. We did have to for construction.
Very good. Appreciate that. Any questions on the resolution? Commissioners? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 2405 CC01, adopting Enrolled Act number 45 and establishing a location for absentee voting and counting centers as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Richards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Toman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion's unanimous. Moving right along into item number 18, we've got the Board of Equalization engagement letter, and we'll hand it back to Clerk Lane.
All right, good afternoon again. Before you is the letter of engagement for Attorney Mark Harris, who is in Uena County. It's also that time of year where it's Board of Equalization, and we have set the dates that you have approved in August. And the next step is engaging an attorney to represent Sweetwater County during that time, as the county attorney's office represents our county assessor. Mr. Harris has worked for us the past few years, and I believe done a really good job in that. And therefore, he has agreed to do it again as long as the commission approves his engagement letter.
Thanks, Cindy. Any questions on the engagement letter before you, commissioners? If not, what is your pleasure?
Chairman,
Commissioner Richards?
to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the Board of Equalization engagement letter with Mr. Harris.
Do you have a motion to approve by Commissioner Richards? Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
What are the dates again? I know they're on the letter, but August.
Motion's unanimous.
I can-
It's the week after the election. I did ask to have it moved to that week instead of election week, so.
Yeah,
Alright,
it's
thank
in
you.
there. I can read it, I guess.
Thanks, Clerk Lane. Appreciate that.
Has the assessor fired up a lot of complaints, so are you gonna have to do a lot of work this year?
Moving right along into item number 19, we've got the fiscal year 25 capital funding request review, which includes all of the fiscal year 25 capital requests from the core county departments and component units. And there will also be updates in regards to the capital fiscal year 24 budget, including the projected carryover for unspent funds, completed projects, and projects that are continuing. And with us again is Rebecca Romero from the clerk's office, as well as members of the capital committee. Welcome back,
Thank you.
and the floor is yours.
Right, so I guess we will start with the capital carryover. So early on, Jean was able to update me what what the purpose of the capital committee was and why that was implemented and what their goal was. So with that in mind, I created this spreadsheet, the first one page 1 that I sent you guys. And as you can see, the carryover at one point was our funds that were unused and kind of went back into the capital pool of funds. And then the reallocated funds are the projects that the capital committee moved up and then continued working on, so that the flow went continuous, which from my understanding was the goal of the capital committee and what the commissioners wanted. So currently you can see that our carryover is 5.7 mil. That will increase or decrease. We have the last invoice for the AM radio projects for the sheriff's office. And then from my understanding, the rifles possibly could be completed this fiscal year as well. So this figure will change. But as far as the carryover, did you guys have any questions on that or the summary of the projects that were completed?
Questions, commissioners? So right now, we're sitting just shy of 6 million, but then obviously you'll have a few projects coming out of that. Do you know roughly what that amounts to or what's left over?
The current projects that are in the process is 162,000.
Oh, I see it there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's what's current. And so that'll change. Like if there's anything left over from the AM radio project, we have the last invoice in the system. Once that is paid, we'll know how much, if any, is left over from that, along with the rifle project. And then I'm not too sure where the sewer job project is at. But that's ongoing as well at 52,000, close to 53. And then the plotter I know was on a purchase order. Hopefully that will also get paid before the end of the fiscal year. So
Okay.
that 162,000 definitely will change, and then the carryover may increase or decrease a little bit depending on where those projects are at.
Then help me out with that. On that same page, you've got the 5.795 listed there, and then it shows component unit projects, and then below there is the grand total for that 9 million. Is that was the original approval? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's the original approval. And so the carryover with the component units is going to be the 6 million. But when it comes to the component units, I wasn't sure, are they allowed to keep that money if their projects are not completed? Or we just leave it in their budget and then they continue with their projects? I wasn't too sure how that worked. Like, I know the core county, everything just goes back into the pool again. So are the component units the same way?
That's my understanding, is that you're all, yeah. Basically, if they don't use it,
Then they lose
they
it.
can
Okay.
reapply for it.
So then that would bring the carryover to that 6 million, depending on where they're at. I've been checking on them. That 31,000 for the library will probably go down. It looks to me like they keep having invoices come in for the carpet and whatever they're working on.
Okay. So roughly 6 million,
Mhm.
pending a few project completions. Okay. Questions or comments on that, commissioners? So I guess with that, that leads you into the fiscal year 25.
Yes. So in our meeting, the capital committee meeting, we decided to do things a little bit differently this year. They were grouped and then ranked within different categories. The main reason for doing that is the construction projects. So the special consideration for construction projects, as you can see, we're requesting almost 12 million for capital projects. However, 7.4 of that is construction that may or may not happen in the next coming year, or it could span over a few years. The night oil project is a good example of that. They took half the capital budget last year at 4.8. It's now being raised to 6.5. And last year they took half of that. And then this year they're taking quite a bit of it as well. And then what we did was like priority 1, and then we ranked them within priority 1.
Okay.
So, and then the same thing with the vehicles. So we had the vehicles and then we ranked those. So we feel the sheriff's office needs to be first on the list to have their vehicles replaced, and then down the list from there. And then again, in the priority 2, and then the construction, those aren't in any other order. They're just grouped together
Okay.
to kind of show where we just didn't want smaller projects within Sweetwater County going on hold because we need so much money set aside for construction projects that, like I said, may or may not happen within the time frame that we're thinking.
So those construction projects, that's just like the Gene Legursky line item, basically, is what that comes to. Tough crowd this afternoon. No, I think that makes sense. I appreciate the clarification on that because I wasn't sure with the different ranking and the priority, but I get it now.
Yeah, and we did not rank the component units. Those were just sent in and they're just numbered by what they had on their sheet. And I think that was just them naming their projects. I don't know that that was necessarily them ranking it. Because everyone the component units, they all kind of named their projects in their own way.
Comments or questions, commissioners, on the capital requests?
And I didn't know if the gentleman had anything to add. I guess not.
Yeah, and I think, we kind of struggle with that year over year just because, especially with the construction projects, you never know how that may or may not go. Obviously, this year it didn't work out for this fiscal year, but we're hopeful that we can make that happen on night oil for next fiscal year. But a lot of the time we have a large carryover just because some of these projects aren't able to get completed within the short construction season. And so, you know, I think sometimes the public looks at that like, you know, why you continue to keep putting money in capital when you're not spending it, but there's just different circumstances that come along with that. And, you know, we are trying to identify needs within different departments to get caught up on deferred maintenance or whatever the case may be. And, you know, the alternative is just to, you know, push it in reserves and let it sit there and do nothing. So, I mean, it's a gamble. I think we kind of play around with that the best we can, but I don't know. I'd rather try and get as much done as possible. I don't know how you all feel about it, but you know, if the money's there and we're able to.
A lot of the projects are also carrying over. So we
Yeah.
have the money carrying over, but there's also projects carrying over, like the night tool is a carryover. All of the Parks and Rec, none of their projects got completed, so so that's on the summary request as well. There's 120,000 for the road and bridge, the entrance and the parking lot. So there's a lot of projects that didn't get completed, but so the funds are carrying over, but the projects are carrying over as well.
Yeah. Okay. No other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Thank goodness. Commissioner Slaughter.
In looking at the overall capital projects budget projected for fiscal 25, I talked with Gene quite a bit about this yesterday and looking at areas that if we were in need of cutting some capital, where we would look at doing that. And really, there are very few areas. Obviously, the biggest one is the night building, the road and bridge budget for $6.5 million. We have not really had much discussion with respect to that. I would assume, because we have not had much discussion, that it is our intent to move forward on that, and then we want to continue with it. But I think as we're working through the budget, that's a discussion that we really need to look at, because $13.5 million of capital is a huge capital commitment. There are a few areas that we could move things back potentially into another fiscal year if we wanted to do that. Deferring those things, as we've talked, is not necessarily always productive, but sometimes it's a necessity. So I just, as we work through the project, I think that it's important that we're committed to what we're going to do, that we are going to commit to move forward with the night building. Another area that is a huge part of the capital for this year is those RTU units. It's $1,800,000. In talking with Gene, you know, once again, they all have to be replaced. We don't have any idea which ones are going to go out and when they'll go out. We had one go out last year, and they will do that. But there's a potential there that we could defer that into another fiscal year if we chose to do that. I was trying to look at things with respect to capital and how we could potentially move some things around if our revenue numbers come in, as we're hearing that they are going to be less than what we had in our last fiscal year. And then also seeing the fact that our requests are going to be certainly higher than what they were. So just another of those things I think we need to be well aware of and have discussions on, and commitments that is the direction we want to move with these capital requests.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Richardson.
just to clarify, Rebecca, the component unit requests were not ranked. The ranks that are on here are just their own rankings of the
Yes.
projects?
Yes. Well, they, not necessarily rankings, on the form, they need to name their project, and that's just how they were naming them. So then it was like application 1, application 2, application 3. So I don't necessarily know that they actually ranked them themselves.
Just looking at library has the boiler listed as a ranking of 1, and the library outreach vehicle is a ranking of 2. I'm just wondering where those 1 and 2 came from. Was that recommendation from the library or from the capital committee?
Oh, the library.
Library.
Yeah,
Okay.
they did their own.
So when I look at one that they just ranked everything as a 1, We have no way to determine whether they actually put thought into that or just thought everything that they asked for was really, really important. Right.
That'll be an interesting one. Yeah, and I mean, on that note, with the component units, there's this idea of, the county owns all the facilities, and so any upgrades should be ran through the county, but then in return, we get hit with all their capital funding requests, and you told us it had to come before you, and I just think that's a misrepresentation. I mean, what we ran into, especially last year, was some of these organizations that are going out and getting additional funding. The library was successful in getting a grant to help with some of the facility upgrades there, and they came before the county for that with assistance. There was another one that consisted of millions of dollars that did not come before us, and so, some of these issues that could be potentially addressed and or otherwise, because we are providing a lot of the maintenance to those facilities, and so I just don't think by ensuring that projects are done properly and not getting us into a bind, with a construction project or whatever the case may be, by having the proper oversight and the individuals that are familiar with the construction process, that is the goal, to ensure that the end result is taken care of for a county-owned facility, and not that by doing that, that means that we will just automatically take on all the maintenance and funding for these individual facilities. And, I'm going to pick on Southwest Counseling because that's exactly what's happening here. And we've essentially never funded their maintenance in the past. And so now, after, being critical on the grant funding that they received through ARPA, they come back and give us about a 62% increase in their budget this year. And it's just not how this works. So we want to ensure that these organizations and component units are taking care of their own maintenance and upkeep, but doing it properly. And that doesn't mean that automatically we're, no open checkbook just because we want some oversight in that. So we'll have those discussions later on, but I just wanted to point that out, that I think there needs to be some better communication there. Any other feedback? Okay. Do you have anything else on that, Rebecca?
No.
Do you need more direction from us, or is it just kind of a early introduction to what's been submitted? And Okay,
Did you want to put the capital on the next workshop to discuss it more? Or did you want to visit with anyone? Whether it's our departments or the outside components about their capital funding request? Because we have a workshop on the 21st, so we can schedule anyone that you want to bring in.
yeah, and refresh my memory, that's going to be after our regular meeting, right? The
Yes.
Budget workshop, okay. And I'm trying to find your timeline you sent me. Were we inviting the Poor County and all that, or is that later on? I can't remember.
Now, I think this year, only if you want them here.
So I guess I would ask if you guys have any preference on that, commissioners.
I would say only if there's a big difference, like a substantial amount more or something that we need to be informed about.
Well, I know for the departments, not with the capital, but regular funding, if I knew the information, I tried to put as much information as I could onto those sheets if it was an increase or whatnot. And so that way you would have that information, so you weren't calling them in just to find out they needed new phones or something. So, but.
Mr. Chairman, I think obviously we need to invite Southwest Counseling to come in and discuss their capital requests.
Happy you would have had that one done.
Mr. Chairman, Gene, have you developed any preference on these component entity capital requests? Or do you not want to? Would it be okay if I asked you to?
Have been in contact with several of them. I have been contacted by both the library and Southwest Counseling on several of theirs. The hard part is, like Chairman West said, I'm kind of in no man's land. I need direction from you guys. And the hard part is there's always a political game that's played with this. Vis-a-vis that we own the buildings, but they maintain the buildings kind of. I've tried to have meetings with several entities that explain the difference between normal maintenance and capital maintenance and what that entails, to no avail. I've also been told that I don't know what I'm talking about by other ones. So it puts us in one of those things where I think we need to have further discussions on exactly how we take care of those buildings and what I need to do to help you guys out to make sure that we take care of the county's infrastructure correctly. Because what we have ran into in a couple buildings is they're not being taken care of. If you look at 3 or 4 years ago when we had an independent consultant come in and survey our buildings and the component unit buildings the next year, they're all in good shape. However, the component unit buildings are in twice as worse shape than the county's buildings. And that is from an independent place, out of Texas that came in to do those. And I think that's of a concern. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is capital is very expensive, doesn't get cheaper. So we need to come up with a long-term 10 and 15-year plan, because to be honest with you, if you guys think 12 million is expensive right now, wait 10 years when this building's 75 years old, or the other buildings are 75 years old, and we really need to look at something else. And we need to look further down the road and get a comprehensive capital plan together with all of our buildings.
I think, Gene, that was the previous commission's intent in forming the capital committee, but I'm not sure we've given you the tools you need to do that fully successfully. I mean, this is a good document, but especially when it comes to component units, I feel we need some advice. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the committee that advice should come from. Is there other resources we need to give you to do that?
No,
Just direction,
direction. And I think I don't want to say the power to do that, but hey, if we own the buildings, we have the right to be able to go in and not, I don't want to dictate what people do in those buildings. But some of the requests, I honestly don't agree with. Terminology on request, how they're going about requests and stuff like that. The other thing that, not to say that anybody or any one entity does stuff wrong, but Commissioner Wendling brought this up a long time ago. What happens with the capital money when we give it to people? The whole reason staff came up with the capital committee is so that we could be forthcoming and that we could help everybody out, because it would be awesome if I could take Night Oil Tools and the 1.8 million for that and have that in the Gene Legursky budget. And then if I have overruns over here, I just use them how I see fit. But that doesn't help out, the sheriff's office or anybody else that needs capital. So we need to have this to be as transparent as possible. And I don't think we're getting that cooperation from component agencies, to be honest with you. So I think maybe, and I hate having working groups or something like that, but if some honest conversation wants to happen, how we can make this better, I think it's a great start. It's what staff has done and the capital committee has done in the last 4 years is great, but it does have some shortfalls and a long ways to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess I'd never thought of it that way, but similar to, the voucher, I mean, the hospital for their maintenance fund. I mean, that works really well just because they submit the invoices, we turn around, we reimburse. It's clean cut and concise, you're right. I mean, we give them their allocation, but we don't know if it's going towards a new stairway or whatever the case is without having, I don't know what that looks like as far as.
The library, we've been paying the bills.
Yeah.
But, and I brought this up before, and I'm not throwing anybody underneath the bus, but the Memorial Hospital, because of how it's set up, that's how it should go. But I've ran into roadblocks for saying, well, that's state statute. That's driven by state statute. Well, it is, but just because it's driven by state statute and it's good policy doesn't mean we can't adopt it for everything else.
Right.
And that's how we do it internally with, with Core County. Is they're all set up in projects. You can see exactly where they're going. You can see what's been invoiced, what's outstanding, and what exactly it's going for. And if something needs to be changed, we come in front of you guys and say, hey, as a committee, we agree that needs to be changed, or we need to shift this over here, because stuff does happen. But there is some shortcomings in how we do stuff. And part of that is because of the facilities portion of it.
Any other comments, commissioners?
Well, I think we should be consistent, like if we do it with one entity, we should probably do it the same for all of them. It's even like our outside entities. Some of them get a stipend every month or every quarter. Some of them submit vouchers.
And it's difficult because each entity is a different animal. Some of the entities are fully funded by this body. Other entities are driven anywhere from 40 to 90% by revenue, and they're providing a huge part of their own maintenance in-house, whereas some of them contract everything. Gene had mentioned to me the possibility of changing the way we do things in maintenance, since there are buildings, and over a few years trying to transition all the buildings to where we would provide maintenance and do it just like we would do in-house. And I think that's a worthy discussion to have. Probably too late to have that discussion for this budget session. But I think it's a worthy discussion to have going forward, because if one of these entities chooses to not provide maintenance out of their revenue streams and just waits for us to give them the money to do it while our facilities decay, that doesn't benefit anybody. We saw the result of that with the youth home in Green River, where we ended up having to sell it at a pretty much loss because it simply wasn't maintained by the entity that we charged with maintaining it. And I don't want to see us get into that situation again. We have some pretty amazing facilities that we trust others to manage, and we might need to take a stronger hand in making sure they're managed correctly.
The other thing I thought of is similar to in the private industry, where you have like a triple net lease, where if they have their own revenue stream, we set aside a portion, or they set aside a portion of that, whatever is dictated that we could come up with, and that's put aside in a separate pot that's matched with our pot to do capital projects. Because if they have their own revenue stream, but they're relying on the county to furnish 100% of their capital, that's a dicey situation for me also. So I think there's some hybrids, but I think to have an honest conversation, that needs to be somewhere where you guys aren't loaded up until 5 o'clock tonight. But have an honest discussion on how you guys would like to proceed with that, because there's a lot of good ideas out there. Obviously, we don't want to recreate the wheel. But it makes me super nervous as being the person that's in charge of the facilities, and sometimes going head to head with other people that don't understand the broader picture of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, somehow we got to get that message across, which I said it last year too, but I appreciate the capital committee and, the spreadsheet and the ranking of the projects. And I think it really helps put things in perspective. And like you said, if there's funds left over, you can shuffle those around within, like we've done this year, to help out a different department or whatever the case is. These components they are a little bit unique, and some are revenue generating, some are statutory based, but I think we need to figure out a way that works for us and try and get that ironed out. And if that's more authority through you or your department, then, I can support that too. So I don't know what that looks like. If you need more assistance on the committee or, a working group like you talked to try and, get through some of that, then, I would certainly be available to help with that. But I get it. We tell them, no, all of your capital needs to come through us. And then they say, okay, well here. And then we say, well, no, we're not saying we want to pay for it. We just want to know what's going on with these facilities. Right. So, I can see the different angles with it, but I don't think it's right that by default we have to pay for it all.
Well, and I think the other big confusion that I've tried to get across is what is capital? Capital is an accounting term, but it's also a building term, and those accountants and people that build don't talk well together because we have different terminology. So I think I've tried to have a couple of meetings and stuff like that with that, but I don't want to get called up if you want to paint your office a different color. If you have to replace a copper square, that's not, but I get those calls a lot, and it all depends on the ebbs and flows of what's going on with the five of you and your liaison to those different entities.
Yeah, we do need to get this room painted too. So did you put that in your budget, or is that still part of the white wall?
This was painted, but we can hang some pictures to make it look pretty.
Working on that. Working on that. Any other feedback on this, commissioners? I think as far as the capital, I mean, all of these agencies like Southwest Counseling have included that in their actual budget requests. So from my perspective, I think when they come before us to present their budget, we can address the capital, item at that time, is how I see it. I don't think they need.
Well, I think we gave guidance to them that if their budget request wasn't out of line from last year's, that we didn't expect them to just show up.
Mhm.
But if we want them to, I think they'll all come in. So I maybe we need to talk to them. I think most of our components are pretty good on their operations budgets. I haven't seen anything that jumps out as a red flag on their employment and operations budgets. The big changes are obviously in the capital. So I think maybe we need to invite them in to come talk to us on their capital budgets if you see anything that needs explanation.
Okay, so I think for Rebecca, do you want to do that next meeting on the 21st?
Yes, we have it scheduled, a workshop for the 21st.
Okay.
So I can definitely touch base with them and set times up and whatnot and see who can come in.
Okay. Work for everyone?
And in the meantime, if everybody else agrees, I'd love it if Gene and the capital committee or the capital committee reviewed some of these component requests and weighed in with their opinion.
We'll plan on that.
Okay.
I guess that takes us to the big, well, they're all big, but the fiscal year 25 budget request filing, item number 20 on the agenda.
Yes. And so that was sent to you last Friday. And like I stated before, on the departments, I did try to go through. A lot of the department heads were really good at leaving me notes when they put their budgets in. The sheriff office was great at that. Just kind of letting me know why they were doing an increase, if they were moving funds around, things like that. So if I noticed an increase, I tried to get with them and I made note of that in those. So then that way, if there's anything that doesn't really stand out a whole lot, you don't really need to meet with the departments. Component units, like they did stay in line as far as their operating budgets. I didn't really see any big jumps with those. The outside agencies, there was a lot of increases there, kind of back and forth. And I don't know who you would like to meet with, if you would like to do that on the 21st, or if you wanted to still go over that now that I sent you the projected revenues last night. If you still wanted to go over it, you can always send me a list later on once you've reviewed it more, and I can reach out to them at that point and get them in here on the 21st.
Well, first off, I appreciate you putting together all the requests. I know that's a lot of moving parts and probably an ungodly amount of emails that you're receiving, and trying to, put that into a packet form of 205 pages. I thought it was very well organized, so I appreciate that. I know this is kind of a first go for you, and we're still trying to figure it out too. So I appreciate the footnotes. That was very easy to follow along, and there's a lot of numbers with the county's budget, and to me, it was easy to follow along with. So I appreciate your efforts with that. On that note, commissioners, I guess that's the next direction that Rebecca's asking for. I will say that, it seems like Core County listened in and, we asked them to kind of come back flat. And even the component units for the most part followed that. The outside agencies, they are increased. And so we did talk about not the need of not having everyone come present to us. So I don't know what your pleasure is on that for this year.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confident in my ability to make recommendations on outside entities without having them come present to us, but if anybody else wants to hear from them. But they may want to be actively trying to schedule time with us because I don't think I'm going to be their favorite person when it comes to making recommendations on their funding.
Okay, so I guess the bigger question here is if we're gonna have a workshop, next meeting on the 21st, obviously we'll have the capital discussion. Do we want to invite anyone? Do you guys want to wait? Do you want to just have the discussion among ourselves and try and whittle the numbers down to an agreeable amount? What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I don't think that I feel that we need to have them come in for the meeting on the 21st. I'm comfortable with looking at the numbers and making recommendations from that.
And with the explanations that are in. I don't know what else would be said, really.
I guess we'll plan on that.
Okay, let me know if you need anything else.
Is there any other areas you need help with or clarification on? I think we finally got everything in. I saw Castle Rocks came in late last night, so
Yes.
that's
Yeah, they were my last one on my list.
okay. Everything else should be good. So no, once again, I appreciate that. I know that's a very difficult thing, but job well done on that. And hopefully we can get you some more direction after the next meeting on where we're gonna start balancing.
Okay,
So thanks very much.
thank you.
That felt like an eternity, but somehow we're still ahead of schedule, commissioners. Castle Rock is up next, and I don't see anyone here, so we're gonna take a 10-minute break and hope that they're here by then.
Kim was here. She was sitting there, but then she left.
And that was hours ago.
Your budget might depend on how your performance is today.
Call this meeting back to order. We left off with item number 22, which is the quarterly ambulance update. We're still waiting on some staff to show up with that, so we're gonna skip ahead. We'll knock these out. These will be fast. To item number 23. This is just a reminder to you all. I briefly discussed it last meeting. But due to the Memorial Holiday weekend, there's a request to amend the Board of County Commissioners agenda deadline for the June 4th, 2024 meeting to May 23rd by noon. So that's going to be a quick turnaround. Obviously, we meet on May 21st. And so just with the way the holiday's following, and then, yeah, our tight newspaper record timeline with that, that's kind of what we're faced with. So if you're good with amending that, or is there any feedback on that? That may allow for a short meeting, which would be kind of nice for once.
I vote yes for a short
Okay.
meeting.
So everyone's good with that? I don't think we need to take action on that. As long as you're all aware. That's what we'll plan on. And you guys want to go next? Okay. We will skip back to item number 22, which is the quarterly ambulance update. We've got Bailey Doctor, the CEO of Castle Rock Hospital District here. We've got Todd, we've got Kim, we've got Dan, we've got the whole team. So thanks for coming over.
So I'm just so excited that Kim is doing wonderfully as the director, so I'm going to let her present first. And if you guys have any questions, we're just here to supplement today, so. Okay.
Very good. Good afternoon, Kim.
Hey, how are you? Okay, so we've sent you the financials and all of that stuff, so I'm not gonna go huge into in depth with all of those. I ran some statistics just from January to March for the first quarter of this 2024. We ran 1,202 calls, 954 of those were 911 calls. The others varied between trips to Utah for patients, trips to the airport, trips home, various things like that. Our times for those responding to those are doing well with from the time we're dispatched till the time that we are en route is less than a minute and a half. And then our response times, of course, varies on as far as from the time we're en route to the time we get on scene varies depending on how far out the scene is, but we're getting there in under 10 minutes, which is good and something that we're continuing to work on. As far as our staffing goes, we show that we have 17 advanced level FTEs, 13 basic FTEs, and for the hours worked, we staff 3.67 ambulances, which is, typically we have 3 ambulances that are working, but I have been diligently backfilling so that we constantly have 3 when we are going on the transports to Utah, so that way we're not decreasing to 2. That's been going very well, and I feel like that's helping our community, especially as we have been having a lot more transfers to Utah than we had previously. So the staff has been stepping in and doing that coverage to help all of us. We also have been busy. We started hosting and doing a class for advanced EMTs, and then it will go on to an intermediate, so that'll advance the skills for those people who already have a basic EMT. Currently, there's 13 in the class total for the advanced. 5 of those are our own employees. And then when we start the intermediate class in July, we'll have those 5 plus 4 more of our staff members who already have their advanced that will be getting their intermediates, which means we'll have more advanced life support staff for our service, which we're super excited about. And then we do have 5 staff members who are currently enrolled in a paramedic course, and that will last 10 months. And so that also increases the skills and the care that they're able to provide for the community. We're super excited about that. The staff has just been doing a phenomenal job of wanting to increase their skills and getting ready to be able to take care of everything that we need to. We have offered on land in Rock Springs to be able to build a different ambulance bay over there with hopes to start construction in the summer. This will be more centrally located, which will help us in our response times. We're super excited about that. As far as financially, we're doing well. We had So far for the year, for the fiscal year, we're showing about a $200,000 savings, and the April finances will be able to improve that. So we're hoping, barring anything happen, we'll be able to reduce the stipend that you give us from 1.8 million to 1.5. So that's pretty exciting to be able to provide the care, but also be able to do it in a cost-effective manner. We do have, going into the summer, a lot of events that we're going to be doing. We've completed one rodeo for the high school. We'll be doing another one in June, and that's for the state high school rodeo. And then, of course, we're participating with Rock Springs Fire and the Nationals. We're also doing the stock car, the BMX. We have just all sorts of different events that we'll be doing over the summer. So our staff is going to be incredibly busy, but we're super excited to participate that and also support the community. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Kim. We appreciate that. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just looking at your heat map, you have a few items out in North Rock Springs, but in your breakdown, you do it by city. Where do you put those
They fall into the Rock Springs.
in the Rock Springs?
They do. Yeah, I was looking to see if there was a different way that we could figure that out, but there's not an option right now in Waters, which is where I pulled this from. That's our state reporting website. I can work with them to see if we can separate that out.
Right.
But yeah, anywhere in the
My
Rock
only
Springs
concern
area.
is that's county versus
Exactly.
city, so.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I can work with them because I noticed that too, and that was something that I think would be interesting just to see. The other thing that I can do, if you would like it in the future, is dispatch can pull a report based on location, whether it's Rock Springs Fire, County, or whatever that goes with us on those. So if that's something you're interested in, we could do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Tillman?
did you work out the thing with the city and their extra ambulances? How you're gonna deal with that?
That's still a work in progress. Last that I talked to Chief Wamsley, they're still working on getting those all set up with the radios and the equipment that they need. So that's still a work in progress, but we are meeting
But
about
you
that.
would still be priority call, right?
As far as I know at this time. Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Slaughter?
just a comment. I'm not sure what is different, but over the last month or 2 months, I have not had any calls personally. So
Yay.
somehow we have gotten the word out, whether it has been through my efforts or your efforts or both, or what has taken place, but I think things are going better. So just wanted to let you know about that, and it's much easier for me that way. So I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. No, I think it's much easier for all of us, and I will tell you that it's been exciting watching all of our staff as we've presented opportunities for growth and different things going on. They have just stepped up. They're excited. It's a really different, just a different feeling within the service. And it's really exciting. So I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
You bet.
Commissioner Jones?
Mr. Chairman, just, would it be, and I don't want to make you create a bunch of lengthy reports, so feel free to chime in or say no. But it seems like you guys are making a lot of progress, which is great. Is there any way to use some sort of a chart or graph or whatever to kind of track the trends? Not on everything. I mean, it was just kind of just popped into my head that maybe the general public probably wants to see some of these improvements as well. And so I was just thinking about things like run times and, the number of calls I don't know means a lot. to the average person sitting on their couch at home, maybe, but
Yeah.
probably not. So just some things like that. Just think on that if you would. And I just think that it seems like you're making a lot of improvements. So I think that ought to be celebrated.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, I guess, back and forth going up to the last, conversation, meeting we had with you guys at your facility there. And I think that was very productive. I think there was a little bit of animosity on both sides, obviously. And I thought, the outcome of that was positive, and hopefully the public agreed with that. I think, the less interaction we've had since then is an indication that, there is some faith and some trust in the service. I know you're working hard with the addition of you taking over and, having to fill in and run ambulance and be the director. I can't imagine that you're getting much sleep with that either, but we appreciate, the attempt to work together and, put those differences aside to make sure that the public's taken care of. And I think that was, a result of everyone kind of letting their guards down and trying to figure out, how we can be successful. And yeah, the numbers show it clearly, if we're looking at 1.6 or 1.5 million, that's great. That's
Yeah.
what the initial goal was. So
Yeah.
kudos to you all, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you for setting up that meeting. I think that, I agree, there was a lot of concern going into it, but I left there feeling like we were in a good spot. And also just, the comments that were made, we all are here for the community. And so I think being able to work together and be able to show unitedly that we're all wanting the same thing, I think really helped. And I know it helped our staff to feel supported and not like they were the enemy, for lack of better terms. So thank you for setting that up and for having that meeting with us.
Yeah, and we appreciate the additional information. I know during that we asked for, more quantitative information in the monthly and quarterly reports, just so that we could be better informed, and I think you're doing that. So thanks for that. We appreciate the budget request that came through finally. But that's great. And, I think it shows that we're on the right track. And so we're excited for that, and anything we can do in between, let us know, but hopefully we can keep that subsidy on the decline and the service on the upward side. So
Perfect.
thanks for all you're doing.
All right, thank you.
With that, commissioners, we just did item number 23 ahead of this one. So that brings us to item number 24, which is the approval of resolution 2405 CC02, a resolution of support for law enforcement officers in Wyoming and the United States. You all. We've got Sheriff John Grossnickel with us here this afternoon. This is more or less a
Photo opportunity.
another photo for Mary, but a very important one at that. Did you have anything you wanted to add before I stutter through this, Sheriff?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, next week, the 12th through the 18th, it's National Police Week. That week was first started by President Kennedy to honor all law enforcement that have lost their lives in the line of duty and those that are continuing to serve. This year, it hit home more than usual because we had the backing of the citizens of our community and the citizens of Wyoming, but we did have a law enforcement officer that was tragically murdered during the course of his duties. So this is just a resolution, and we appreciate your guys' support and the support of all the law enforcement within the county too.
Very good. This is the lengthy one, so bear with me here. Resolution of support for law enforcement, expressing support for the law enforcement officers in Wyoming and the United States. Whereas more than 800,000 law enforcement officers in Sweetwater County, Wyoming and the United States risk their lives daily to serve and protect their communities, including more than 1,230 in the state of Wyoming. Whereas there are now more than 23,000 names counted among America's fallen law enforcement heroes on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, dating back to 1786, including 54 from Wyoming. Whereas more than 2,400, law enforcement officers have died in the United States in the line of duty during the past decade, an average of one officer fatality every 36 hours. Whereas some politicians and interest groups have responded to the risks faced by law enforcement officers with calls to defund or even abolish law enforcement agencies across the United States. Whereas defunding or otherwise demoralizing law enforcement officers will make it more difficult for officers to intervene in dangerous situations in high-risk neighborhoods. Whereas law enforcement officers typically encounter between 400 and 600 traumatic events during the career of the officer, compared with 3 or 4 traumatic events encountered by the average citizen. Whereas the unusually high number of traumatic events experienced by law enforcement officers has contributed to a 54% higher suicide rate among officers than among individuals in other jobs. And whereas the Bureau of Justice Statistics has confirmed that there is no statistically significant difference between the rates at which major racial and ethnic groups are stopped in police-initiated interactions. Whereas the innovative and dedicated efforts of law enforcement officers have successfully brought down crime rates from historic highs. And whereas the defund and defame the police movement that began in 2020 has coincided with a dramatic rise in homicides and other violent crimes in cities and towns across the United States, And two, cause the retention and recruitment of sworn law enforcement officers to drop to a dangerously low level, with current numbers showing fewer law enforcement officers per resident than any other time during the 25-year period preceding the date of adoption of this resolution. Whereas in 2020, 60,105 law enforcement officers were assaulted by criminals, resulting in 18,633 injuries. The number of arrests made by law enforcement officers throughout the United States dropped to 7,630,000, a 24% reduction from 2019 and the fewest number of such arrests in 25 years. Whereas 72% of officers surveyed are less willing to stop and question suspicious persons than they were before 2020. Whereas the rhetoric associated with the defund and defame the police movement has created an increasingly dangerous environment for law enforcement officers in which, in 2023 alone, 378 officers were shot, 46 of whom were shot fatally. Whereas supporting law enforcement officers with the equipment, training, and funding needed to protect communities in the United States from criminal violence has long received overwhelming public support from across the political spectrum. And whereas the week of May 12th through the 18th, 2024 has been designated as National Police Week, a time to honor the men and women who serve in law enforcement, and pay special tribute to those officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice, and the families of those fallen heroes. Therefore, be it resolved that the Sweetwater County Board of County Commissioners highly respects and values the law enforcement officers of Sweetwater County, Wyoming, and the United States, and greatly appreciates all that those officers do to protect and serve their communities. That we remember and honor law enforcement officers who have experienced a death or injury in the line of duty and the families of those officers. And we call for increased measures to be taken to maximize the safety and well-being of law enforcement officers, including improvements relating to the retention and recruitment of officers, improving training and equipment for officers, tougher penalties for assaulting or killing an officer, and increased mental health resources for officers. That we strongly condemn the misguided and disastrous movement to defund and defame the police. And we call on all levels of government in Wyoming and across the United States to ensure that law enforcement officers receive the support and resources needed to keep all communities in Wyoming and the United States safe. Very moving resolution. With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve as presented, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make that motion.
We have a motion to approve Resolution 2405 CC02 by Commissioner Toman. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by, I think, Commissioner Jones. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I had discussion.
Sorry about that.
I just wanted to say Sweetwater County has law enforcement personnel that are second to none in the country, and that is reflective of their leadership. So Sheriff, thank you for the leadership you provide in Sweetwater County and in keeping our neighborhoods safe.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Richards, thank you for that. And again, we couldn't do it without the support of you guys, our community, and the men and women that are out there doing the job every day. I also forgot to let you guys know that on the 15th at the sheriff's office in the parking lot that is closest to purchasing, our community partners of Commerce Bank will be there with their barbecue with cheeseburgers and refreshments and things like that. So if you want to join us and all the law enforcement within the county who's been invited, please come out and say hi and have something to eat.
What time is that?
11 until 1 on the 15th.
We have that resolution. You got it on your side over there? We can take a picture.
Should be in yours. Oh, maybe I do have it. Hold on. Yep.
You want to read that again?
Join us for a picture if you would. I know, it's hard to keep up. Okay, that brings us to the final item of the agenda, if you can believe it, commissioners. We're still ahead of schedule, so we're doing pretty good. Item number 25 is the 2024 Sweetwater County Commissioner Scholarship Award. And we generally discuss these in executive session because they do have information that is protected by law. So with that, I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss personnel, and we will be taking action upon coming out.
Mr. Chairman, just before we get to that, we all got an email from Gene that he won't be here for our next meeting, including budget workshop. So should we reschedule any capital discussions to the next workshop after that, if we have one?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I did talk with Gene about this yesterday. He told me that he would be gone. I told him if there were any things that came up, I would be willing to get in touch with him and we could talk about it. So he said he will have his cell phone and he will be available. So if we have anything that we need to do, I would be glad to liaise with him on that.
We can see if our trusty liaison can fill in. If he can't, we'll push it to the next one, I
Okay.
think.
Mr.
That a
Chairman, with
motion?
that, I'd move we go into executive session to discuss scholarship applications and personnel.
A motion to enter into executive session by Commissioner Richards. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. We are now in executive.
Well, Ann, was it as fun as you remembered it?